Hello, Ro here, and today I'm going to explore the concept of worldview, and to do so, I will try and break it down into what I believe are its three base components. But before that, I'll try to give a very concise explanation so that you have an idea of what we're talking about. In its essence, your worldview is like a lens through which everything that you experience passes through in order to become actual information that you can know. But usually it's not a very transparent lens, it's almost like a kaleidoscope in that it has different angles and colors, and the result of that is that two different people can experience the same event and have completely different notions of what happened. So, with that out of the way, let's get to the meat of the matter. I broke it down into three pillars, and those are your beliefs, your values, and your tools. Your beliefs are, as the word already implies, that which you believe to be true or untrue. In other words, the main thing about a belief is that they are judged on their truthfulness or on their perceived truthfulness. Because as far as your worldview is concerned, it only matters whether you believe it or not, and not whether it's actually true. Your beliefs relate from simple things like whether you trust this specific friend to whether you trust science or the Bible to very fundamental parts of how we relate to the world, like can we trust our senses? Can we trust our own thoughts? One example that I personally find very interesting about how our beliefs influence our reality and our actions is something that I believe to be at the center of the current left-right divide, and that is whether humanity is inherently selfish or not. One side tends to believe that we are actually inherently selfish and savage and wild, and that means that any sort of institution that can keep us from acting that way, even if it's not a perfect institution, is still much better than nothing. The other side, on the other hand, believes that humanity is not inherently selfish, but it is unfortunate that our current institutions and the way society is organized so far fosters selfishness and violence. Depending on how far to each side you fall, you are more likely to align with one side or the other. Some other examples that I think are relevant and useful for us are whether you believe God or not, or whether you believe hard work pays off in the end. If you don't believe that, you are much less likely to find the motivation to do whatever it is that you want to do. The opposite's also true. Whether other people will follow the rules. If you believe nobody cares about the rules that society imposes on us, even if you see value on them, maybe at some point you just give up, because what is the point of being bound to rules that nobody else follows? This is a very clear example. I think probably everybody saw something like a random person throws trash in the ground, and when questioned about it, they're like, oh, but everybody does it. So if nobody follows the rules, why should you? Or if you believe nobody follows the rules, why should you? Because in the end, you can't really be sure, and that will end up affecting how good of a citizen you are. The second pillar on our list are our values. And they are also a pillar that has a very self-explanatory name, in the sense that our values are, in essence, anything that has value in our eye. And that means this pillar regulates both what is good or bad and what is good or evil. Good or bad relates to whether we find a specific thing to have value. So let's say you really like a song, it's pleasing to you, it has value to you, it's a good song. But maybe that very song, if somebody starts to listen to it while you are trying to sleep, that's a bad thing, because at that very moment, sleep had more value to you than that song. Now, when it comes to good, the opposite of evil, on the other hand, what we generally mean is that something or someone, maybe some force or action, is adding or subtracting value from the world. So let's say they are going to cut down a forest near your house in order to build a new factory. One person can look at that and say that's just plain evil, they're cutting down the forest for profit, and then choose maybe to go and protest the cutting of the forest. Another person may look at the same event and think that's great because it will create so many jobs and maybe the people in the community need it because they're poor. And then the second person will see the first person protesting and will be like, that person is evil. They are so selfish that they are trying to hinder the construction of something that will create opportunities for so many people just because he likes to take walks in the forest. You see, two very different perspectives on reality because of two very different sets of values, and resulting in groups seeing each other as huge problems, huge forces of evil. And those are our values. Now, the last item or pillar on our list, the third one, are our tools. The only one whose name is not as self-explanatory as the other two. Our tools are things that aren't judged on whether they are truthful, nor on whether we like them or not. They are judged based on their utility, on how useful we perceive them to be. Now, I personally chose to break down this pillar into two subgroups. The first one are what I called the tools of understanding, because they are quite literally the tools to help us increase our understanding of the world. So let's say you saw a bird that has a very weirdly shaped beak. If you know about the theory of evolution, you can ask yourselves different questions that will help you understand why is it that the beak is in that shape. So maybe wonder if it's something that will help the bird attract a mate, or maybe you can think about the different types of fruits and nuts that exist in your region in order to assess whether it might be helpful in the eating process. You saw something in the real world, you analyzed that piece of information with some knowledge that you had, and from that you can arrive at new conclusions and new forms of understanding about the reality that you live in. A famous example of a tool of understanding would be the scientific method itself. The idea that you can make a hypothesis and then test that hypothesis to make a theory. That's one that's in the cornerstone of modern society, but there are other ones like critical thinking by itself could be considered one, or the Socratic method, or different forms of historical analysis. There are quite a few different ones, and they vary a lot from one area of knowledge to another, but they all have in common one thing, is that we only keep them because they are useful. We don't need to like them, we don't need to believe in them. All we need from them is to be able to apply them at something in order to know reality better. And now the second subgroup are what I chose to call our tools of navigation. I chose to make this classification because these they differ from the previous subgroup because they don't necessarily help us understand the world better, but they help us navigate through life. So the most famous example are our principles. Rules that we set to ourselves and choose to abide to in order to live life as we deem it should be lived. these ones are generally based on our values. So let's say I value health. I can make rules like I can't eat dessert more than once a day, or I can't eat fast food more than once a month, or I can never eat fast food. Often they exist in order to help us when there are conflicting values. Like maybe we value health, but we also love sugar. So we can create principles in order to be able to enjoy life, but not allow the things that we enjoy to compromise other aspects of life. Another example of a principle would be if I value honesty, I can set a principle that I can't lie. Or if I value honesty, but I live in a dangerous place, maybe I can allow myself to lie when I perceive myself to be in a dangerous situation. Those are our principles, and they are very important if we want to live a fulfilling life. But principles are not the only tools of navigation. We also have boundaries, but beyond that, there are a multitude of mental models that we can acquire and keep in our mind in order to function in the world. So different scheduling techniques, time management, financial management, certain rules that I can only spend X% of how much I earn. Those are all different tools that we can have, but they don't necessarily help us know more stuff. They just help us live life. And those were our tools. Now, it is very important to understand that even though I separated our worldview into those three pillars, in order to explain what they are, we have to know that inside our minds, they are always relating to each other and working together. So let's say there is a comet passing through the sky and two different people see the same comet. One person may be very religious and dogmatic and not very well studied. They may see the comet and think, oh shit, the comet is passing through the sky. That means God is angry because I cheated on my wife. Now, that's a belief the person has that the comet is a sign from God. Now, they may start to feel afraid because they don't want to go to hell. So they have a value, they value not being in hell. So they would ask for a priest and repent. Another person seeing the same comet might be a more studied person, and they see the comet and they think, well, I see that and I believe that if I put my trust on what I know and the different techniques and equipments that our society has produced, so a different set of beliefs will allow me to maybe calculate the orbit of the comet and thus know more. So they have a belief that will allow them to use these methods as tools to know more about life. And also this person probably values doing that sort of stuff, otherwise they wouldn't. So in the end, every one of these pieces is working together with the other two in order to guide us through our paths and take the actions that we do in our day-to-day lives. And that's what I had for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. If you have feedback, feel free to type it in the comments. If you don't have feedback, I hope that means you enjoyed. Next video, I will try to explore what are the main characteristics of a worldview. And yeah, thanks.